Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and welcome back for another fun-filled week in South Africa. I'm joined today by Terence Corrigan, who has just returned from leave, and we are very happy to have him back. And also, it's his first time on YouTube. Terence, well, first time since the original version of the show. But anyway, first time on YouTube. How are you, Terence?
Yeah, well, just off leave. Let's leave that conversation for another time.
Exactly. And Miss Sara gone. Sara, how are you? How are you this week?
I'm very well, thank you, Nick.
Excellent. Right, let's get started with what I think probably will end up being maybe one of the big stories of this year, and a very important one for South Africa. It's still too early to tell quite what the significance of the story will be, but that is that the EFF wants the national and local governments merged and the local governments postponed until 2024. So on Friday, the EFF put out a statement calling for the local government elections and reopening of schools to be postponed due to the rising number of COVID-19 infections and related deaths. And there is someone's neighbor starting up a chainsaw. Sorry. In a virtual address, Julius Malema said he was forging ahead with the two major events would be gambling with the lives of South Africans. He said that South Africa did not have the capacity to run elections in any form other than physical voting through the ballot paper, the way we've always done it, and that COVID had made it impossible for political parties to campaign and engage their constituencies. To run elections in such a climate will therefore constitute an undermining of democracy as well as putting the lives of our society at risk, Malema said. We call for all elections, local government elections, to be postponed to 2024, as an election can be regarded as a super spreader event. Currently, the elections are set for somewhere, I think, around August, October, November this year. The EFF's also called for the schools to stay closed. They were planning to reopen on the 27th of January, but they're now talking about the 15th of February. So let me go to you first, Terence. Should we take this seriously? I mean, this would require constitutional change, presumably, to delay the elections.
Yes, but I think that the EFF is the party of constitutional changes. I don't think that the EFF is overly concerned about the effect of constitutional governance on this, or of doing this. In fact, I think that if you can play fast and loose with election dates, you can play fast and loose with a lot of other things. Remember that they were I suppose you could say the originators of a sort of the whole assault on the Constitution in terms of Section 25. I also think that the EFF finds itself in a bit of a bind. They've enthusiastically endorsed lockdowns, restrictions of activities, and that sort of thing, which, while one can make a case in public health grounds for these things, have not been popular and have come with massive collateral costs. And I think that they are concerned that they could well be held held accountable along with the ANC. So for that reason, I think that we haven't heard the last of this issue. I think it'll be pushed quite aggressively, and I do think that there is a strong constituency within the ANC that would like to go the same way. Incidentally, if one is regarding elections as a super spreader, then I think that a lot of other things would need to be put on ice. Talking about public consultations for certain constitutional amendments, for instance. Somehow, I think that that we won't see that sort of consistency there.
I think one of the very concerning things about this is the desire, and this is kind of what gives the game away here, that this is about more than COVID. So traditionally speaking, the DA tends to perform better in local government elections, as its voters tend to turn out in higher numbers, whereas ANC voters tend to stay home, probably they're upset with their local councillor or whatever. And so the DA overperforms in local government elections. And it's long been a belief of the ANC that if they moved the national and local government elections to the same day, that they would be able to diminish or eliminate this effect entirely. And so the fact that Malema wants the two elections to be on the same day suggests that, well, this is about something other than COVID. What do you think of that, Sara?
Well, just to say first that only the EFF could make a democratic act an undemocratic act by postponing the elections. The thing is with the EFF is that it does, like the ANC, it does better in national elections. Municipal elections, it does not, as everyone is, want to say, it does not run a single municipality. Now that's significant because, and I'm sure the guesswork here is that if they have the municipal elections on the same day as the provincial and the national elections, they are likely to do better in municipal elections, which is quite interesting because you would have thought that the EFF would kind of be a people of the party of the people, a party of the people at their most, where they need it most, which would be at a municipal level.
How they sell themselves, yeah.
And they're not there. It would require a constitutional amendment, but the only thing one fears, of course, is that if you've got the EFF and the ANC going together on this, which is probably most likely, they might well get it. But it's been proven. I'm not that optimistic about things, but generally proven that whatever you do, constitutional amendments are not that quick in the making. The tide of the epidemic could turn. And then, of course, whether it's a super spreader is a question of whether it's managed properly. And it's probably not much of a super spreader because by the nature of an election, the process that goes on at the polls, people have to stand at some distance, can be made to stand a greater distance and vote behind a booth, which, the whole idea is, particularly in the voting areas, to keep people apart. So much like the question of whether the schools is actually schools are something that should be closed, there's, I'm in a little doubt about both issues.
Right, and I think there's a good point there. There were some elections in the US, so I haven't seen any analysis of COVID spread from the November election in the US, which is of course a big one. But there were earlier elections where people had to show up to the polls in person, which didn't appear to have a lot of spread linked to them. And that's because those smaller elections, at least, were well managed. I think that there's a sort of serious threshold that gets crossed, though, in the kind of stability and democratic health of a society when you postpone an election. And obviously, one can see the rationale for postponing it now because of COVID, and probably correctly, the EFF believes that we won't be able to run our elections to a degree which would prevent COVID spread. But Terence, is there any reason why we couldn't have the election, let's say, in 2022?
Well, I think that Sara's probably better poised to answer this question than I am. But I think that there are time limits, and sort of this year is when is the window. It does, however, I think there's a number of subsidiary points. First of all, if we talk about having the election in August or sometime later in the year, and it's still regarded as a super spreader event, that says something about the confidence that that they have in the ability to roll out the vaccine.
Right.
The other thing is, would it be possible to attach conditions to the election that might limit that spread? Would a multi-day election be possible? If your concern is about large queues, if you could stagger it over, say, like 3 days or whatever, 2 or 3 days. Remember, that's what we did in 1994. Would that be possible? I imagine it'd be more expensive.
That's India, all of its elections, I believe, because it's got sort of 700 million voters or something.
But look, I don't think that one should discount the concerns entirely simply because the EFF raises them, and as you correctly say, because there would be certain advantages to particular parties to amalgamating these elections, and then perhaps reducing them all to sort of a brand campaign as opposed to at least having a shot of talking about local issues. But I think that you're entirely correct. It is a very grave thing to postpone an election. If they're talking about 2024, it's 2021. I mean, that's an additional 3 years. You okay there, Nicholas?
Yeah, no, I just dropped my camera. Continue on, please.
An additional 3 years within which a great deal can happen. And I think that's no matter how genuine and how genuine the reasons and how valid the argument may be there, I think that we will pay a very, very steep institutional and political price. The other thing, just to riff on that point I made earlier, in order to have a constitutional amendment, presumably you would need some sort of consultation.
Right.
How does one do that without encouraging the very kind of super spreader effect that you're trying to avoid?
Exactly, and that becomes
the Gordian knot.
Right. Any process initiated would be rushed. It would be sort of playing fast and loose with the rules, and then you get some serious degradation in your constitutional structure and health. My last thing I want to talk about, unless you have something to add, Terence, is it looks like there's a lot of dovetailing right now between the EFF and at least a certain faction of the ANC, possibly the majority faction of the ANC, in terms of policy agenda and what they're pushing for. Because now you can very easily see how the ANC could look at this proposal and say, oh, well, actually, you see, we're working together with the EFF and they're going too far, but we have a version of this bill that's slightly different, or this idea that's slightly different, and then the two cooperate together to change the constitution. I mean, it really looks like the EFF is coming back into the ANC fold. Is that reasonable to say? Do you think, Terence?
Look, I think that once again, there'd be a great deal of water that would have to go under the bridge. I think that ideologically, there's a great deal of overlap. Fundamentally, whatever the differences, both are nationalist organizations, and it's a nationalism understood fundamentally in terms of race. Right. This isn't about South Africanism or Pan-Africanism, or this is very much linked to the great South African demon.
Right.
I think though there are big personalities at play, and I think that there are probably many people in the ANC who might be content with the EFF policy agenda, who wouldn't want Julius Malema muscling his way up to the top.
Right.
So, while I don't think that one can discount this as some sort of unity deal, or at least having the makings of one, I think I think whatever any move in that direction would be very, very messy and unpleasant for all concerned.
Right. Sara, any final thoughts on this topic?
Just to say that, suddenly what's really come onto the agenda since the beginning of this year has been the issue or the two issues linked: the ANC's ideology and its overbearing incompetence. And it's been seen, it's been seen everywhere, but particularly at local municipality level. And the number of municipalities that would have to be got out of a lot of trouble financially and otherwise I think is too great for the provinces to manage. And the ANC may well just be looking, one of the reasons it looks to kick in this election to kick into touch is because it's hoping that by 2024 somehow they will have got things right. I think that's highly unlikely.
I agree. I think there's another
the somehow factor.
Yes,
right,
somehow.
Exactly. There's another thing I think to consider, which is that ANC internal politics at a local level is often driven by, who is the councillor at the time, and then the patronage network attached to that councillor, especially in poorer areas where people are desperate for resources. And so if they postpone the election, there's going to be serious ramifications, because, there's going to be a lot of places where the councillor is expected to, not stand again or something, and there's someone waiting in the wings to take over, and now suddenly their access to kind of potential patronage is going to be cut off. And whenever the ANC goes into internal candidate discussions, there's always chaos. It often spills over into service delivery protests and things like that. So the ANC might cause a lot of trouble for itself that it may not expect if it postpones this election from its own party members. But anyway, that remains to be seen. Hopefully we can avoid this, because I think this would be a very dangerous thing to happen. Anyway, let's go on to a little story now from FEDUSA, which is the Federation of Unions of South Africa. It's one of the smaller trade union federations. And they have issued a statement calling for, as long as we have level 3 lockdown, there should be a moratorium on all retrenchments across the country. The union said that while it welcomed extended restrictions as a tool to curb the spread of COVID, there were concerns about the effect on tourism, personal care, entertainment, and hospitality sectors. The union said that companies must consider all possible avenues instead of continuously using workers as scapegoats. FEDUSA said that the adjusted level 3 by government is a bittersweet move in light of the hardships being experienced by its members. They then went on to say that a lot of jobs had been lost because of COVID. Sara, I don't think this is the solution that's going to fix our COVID problems, is it?
Well, let's put it this way. There may be some companies out there saying, well, this is a great excuse to get rid of a whole lot of workers who are not doing their jobs properly. But I think by and large, the vast majority of companies that are in trouble are in such trouble because of losing business that it's not even retrenchment. The best they can say to their employees is, look, if things get better, we'll look at hiring you back, but we just don't have money. We don't have money to keep you employed. We don't have money to pay you a retrenchment package. It's a kind of no holds barred, desperate situation. It's not a case of sort of restructuring to create efficiency. That may end up being an unexpected consequence of something like the lockdown. But I think it's more of what should we call it, a cri de coeur than actually something of practical help. Because in the current climate, the very industries that FEDUSA is worried about, if they're going to be in trouble, they are going to be in such trouble that many of them will probably just disappear. So I think it's more a sort of plea to show solidarity with their membership than to actually achieve anything of value.
Agree with that, definitely. Sorry, I keep dropping my camera, if you're wondering why my camera. It's all funny because it's balanced on things, but let's not worry about that. Terence, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, if I would belong to a trade union, I would want it to fight tooth and nail for me to keep my job and to get better pay. I mean, we often, I think, with some justification, point to the shenanigans, that unions engage in as being counterproductive. And I say there's truth in that, but one has to look at it from the other point of view. Cri de coeur, I mean, I think that's correct. But my experience last year speaking to business people, two things kept on coming up. Generally speaking, they had sort of 3 months of reserves or whatever before they weren't viable anymore, and they had to start doing things. Two is that all of them, I think, certainly everyone I spoke to, and I think this is true. This is true across the board. No one wanted to get rid of their employees. This may come from a sense of personal loyalty, but it's also a horrible admission that the environment and your ability to function in it is fading. So I don't think that this is done maliciously or with any kind of glee. It's I think a desperately bad situation. I know of one entrepreneur who he and his staff didn't receive a salary for 3 months. There was just no business, and they had they sort of had reserves to cover the overheads, but he was personally not taking a salary. I know another guy who runs a small kind of luxury goods outfit, and he has one employee, and he said that his first priority was to make sure that his family could eat, and the second was to help this guy, been with him for years, to survive. And there again, I also know people who've run businesses that have failed over the years, independent of COVID. They were killed by Eskom, that were killed by just the downturn in the economy, because something that a product that might have sold well in 2010 started to become a luxury item, started to be constrained by the rising costs of advertising on Google, and then when Eskom just shut you down for a couple of days, you couldn't recover from that. So exactly. No, I understand what they're saying, but this isn't something where I think you can simply make a choice and follow through.
Right, and I think that the union is directing its ideas in completely the wrong direction, because they're basically saying, look, employers must front up the money to weather this complete calamity that's sort of unfolding, whereas you'd expect that they should be asking government, because where's the money going to come from if it's from the private sector? That you can't say to businesses, oh, you can't operate to generate any profit, and also you must keep paying your workers, because they're just not going to be able to.
So, Sara, go ahead.
No, I think this is a fundamental problem, because the help that was allocated by government sort of through the first lockdown was not even 10% of it was taken up, because the terms were too onerous. Ramaphosa has now said, as of last week, there is no money to help businesses in the current climate.
Right.
And it's all, he talked about the thing is, an economy such as ours, and I thought, well, yeah, 15 years ago we were an economy that might have been able to do it. Since the disaster of the last 12, 13 years, not a hope in hell could we do it, and that's because the government is responsible for the economy that we've got. Just a little anecdote: I flew to Cape Town on Christmas Day, and after going through security, chatted to the security guy on the other side, and I said, "I'm sorry you have to work on Christmas Day." And he said, "Not at all. I have a job. And we are not going to know for another 1.5 to 2 years how badly this is really affecting all of us." And then I thought we should hire him at the IR. But, I think most people, both as employers and employees, understand how crucial things are, and how few resources people have to keep body and soul together. But I don't think there's a sort of blame that the employers are kind of doing their utmost to make their employees' lives miserable. And to the contrary.
And this is exactly why we made so much song and fuss before COVID about the state that the government had put us in. And in our analysis, we said, look, South Africa has been brought to a point where one shock is going to cause, cascading disasters. And little did we know that just around the corner was going to be one of the biggest shocks in decades, which has proven that you really do need to save in the good times for the bad times, because otherwise, you're going to be faced with this situation. If our unemployment rate had been at the beginning of the pandemic half of what it was, if our growth had been double what it was, then government would be in a much better place. But the cover is there.
Will be.
I think we all would. Just your airport analyst. I spoke to my aunt and uncle in the UK a couple of days ago, and they said, "How are you going?" And the only response was, "Well, I'm employed." It doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyway, I think that's all we have to say on that. Let us move overseas now to talk about another story from the US. We've covered a couple, I think, last week. But you could see this as potentially the first big test of the incoming Biden administration. Biden is set to be inaugurated on the 20th of January, after Congress confirmed his election on the 6th of January. So the Central American country of Honduras has been devastated recently by various calamities, hurricanes, crime, corruption, all those terrible things. And as a result, caravans of people have been, every now and again, with much fanfare, a few thousand people all try to walk up Central America to get to the United States border and seek asylum. They have now been stopped in Guatemala, about something like 8,000 people by the border guards before they could cross over into Mexico, just as they crossed into Guatemala. And there was a lot of chaos. There was, I think, a video of Guatemalan police basically sort of attacking them with sticks and tear gassing them to stop them moving forward. Mexican border guards interviewed by Reuters said that all is calm here and that they hope that Guatemala would contain them. Now, this has important ramifications for the US, where Biden's opposition is saying that this is just the first of many immigration crises that are going to descend on the country once he takes control, because he has promised to loosen immigration restrictions, and in contrast to the way that Donald Trump had done things. The migrant caravans organizers said that the Biden administration had to honor their, quote, commitments, unquote, to the migrants moving north, citing their promises during the election. A Biden transition official told NBC News that while there's help on the way, now is not the time to make the journey. The situation at the border isn't going to be transformed overnight, the official told the NBC. We're here to provide a message that health and hope is on the way, but coming right now does not make sense for their own safety, while we put in place processes that they may be able to access in the future. So that's quite a wishy-washy statement there. Which is, of course, encouraged ire from both left and right. The far left in the US is saying that he is sold out and that this is what happens when you elect a white man. And the right is saying this is the beginning of the end of America as a sovereign nation. Sara, it's all a bit overheated. What do you make of this first sort of test of the incoming Biden administration?
Well, you see, I mean, it sounds a lot to have a march of 8,000 people, but I don't think that the numbers per se are the problem. I think the problem is the fact that Biden is going to be might be caught short on this by the very virtue of the fact that you're going to have a sort of clarion call from the far left to say, let in whoever, they are poor, misbegotten people, they must be let in. And not even the right, but probably the center and the liberal, the soft left, will be uncertain about this because it's a sort of open sesame policy-wise. And of course, the problem with coming from a country like Honduras is, Honduras is exactly what the sort of country that I think Trump would have referred to in his sort of category of shithole countries. It is desperate in every possible way, which means that you're getting people who are poor, who are desperate, and probably you've got a fair amount of the criminal class amongst those people marching. And wow, if I were coming from Honduras, I think America would look very, very attractive. And the problem is that I think it has the real potential to become a media frenzy. I'm not sure how Biden's going to get through this without pissing off one large constituency or another large constituency. It is going to be, I think, the first real test, not China or Europe or Brexit or anything else, because this is on the border. It doesn't get more emotive than this.
Terence, your thoughts?
A couple of things. The first is that I think this is where reality starts to bite. It was very. It was easy, and and I must say I had some sympathy with it myself. The designation of illegal immigrants as rapists and whatever, I think it's unkind and perhaps unnecessarily provocative and counterproductive. But what is it that you want? Is the policy response entirely open borders, come one, come all? Because I'm not aware of any modern state that does this. There was a little news story I remember reading a couple of years ago that apparently a number of Haitian immigrants to America or asylum seekers were very perturbed by Trump's election, and they were trying to move into Canada. And apparently the Canadian government asked the American Border Patrol, these guys aren't, we don't want them, please stop them from coming in. This was after Mr. Trudeau had made had made a big song and dance about how Canada's the world's ultimate haven, and we welcome all, provided you fit our point system, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think also there's something to bear in mind here. These aren't small family groups of people, hoping to get jobs in the construction sector, and their kids at some point will become citizens and go to medical school. You have a caravan like this, which is organized. It's targeting not so much getting a group of people across, but at striking at the legitimacy of that policy. Now it seems to me that that Mr. Trump's detractors, and there was much to detract in what Mr. Trump had to say, was now need to specify clearly what the alternative is. Is it a matter of moral and ideological principle now that borders are open to everyone, and that that the only qualification for living in the United States is simply your ability to arrive, to participate in the labor market, and then social benefits or whatever, or is it some sort of uncomfortable in between where we don't really accept this, but we don't do anything to help, and we just sort of allow a policy vacuum to take over. These are serious questions. The other thing actually that I was thinking about is in the run to the show, I think sometime in the 60s or 70s, a French author wrote a book called The Coast of the Saints. Now, I don't want to give an ambiguous endorsement to this book, because apparently it became quite a thing amongst the far right, but the basic story is that there's like 1 million people in India decide they're going to move to France, and they get on this flotilla of barges and they sail. And if memory serves, the author's main target wasn't so much the immigrants who are more just a presence, but the French political and intellectual class who are, can't decide whether they want this as a redemption for France's colonial record, or whether they see a train smash coming. Now that all seemed quite bizarre when it was written, but the world changes fast, and that's not 1 million people, and it's not barges, going around the coast of the coast of Southern Africa. Apparently, South Africa has a cameo role in that story. This is essentially that Coast of the Saints moment. Have we now entered an ideological space worldwide where it is indefensible to want to police your borders? If we have, then I think that must be put forward as a policy option, as opposed to
talked about,
or something allowed to happen by default. And just to put this in perspective, let's say a train of 1 million people were departing from a rural road in Malawi, to quote a former president of ours, and we're heading down through Zimbabwe to come and take up residence in South Africa. What would the response be there?
Indeed, questions to ponder. We must close off now because we're going over time. Thank you very much to both of you. Sorry we went a bit long, but we will look forward to speaking to you again over the week. So have a wonderful day, everyone, and we will speak to you soon.